Peace and love, everybody. I am Akil Bey, Wazir Al-Rez of Morocco State Republic, here with Kendon Bey, the Wazir Al-Rez of DMT, and the other Wazir, Amir El, is not with us this evening. Um, this is the open forum, and welcome and thank you for attending the open forum. I'll first yield the floor after I give a brief description of what's going on. I'll yield the floor to Wazir Kendon here in a second. But today's open forum will be over the relinquishment of consular jurisdiction in Morocco. This isn't the first video on this, but we'll take a different approach, a slightly different approach this evening. So with that said, I'll yield the floor to Wazir Kendon to speak on anything or say anything he'd like to say, and then we'll get into the study session. I yield.
Islam, I ain't really have too much, but I really feel like this is a good document. It's a lot about this whole situation that, sometimes it just leaves you unanswered and you wonder how the colonists or how the European think or, what they're going to say. But this is an excellent document. We was luckily able to find, and it's going to go real in detail, about this jurisdiction and how it works and, their perception of what they understand about it, how they look at us, and how they respect us, right? Even though it may not seem like it, on the side of the coin we're on now. But with that idea, we can start to read.
All right. Before we get started, I will be asking anybody to. I will be asking the floor to pick up the reading. So we'll just switch readers from time to time. Okay. But I'll start off the read. Okay. It says this was done on April 10th, 1956. Okay, it's the United States Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, Washington, D.C. All right, it says the committee met pursuant to a call at 11 a.m. in the Foreign Relations Committee Room, United States Capitol Building. Senator Walter F. George, the chairman, presiding. Present was Senators George, the chairman, Green, Fulbright, Mansfield, Smith, Langer, Nolan, and Aiken. Chairman. The committee will come to order. We have before us the consideration of the State Department's request for authority to relinquish United States consular jurisdiction in Morocco. And we will be very glad, Mr. Allen, to hear you on the subject. And this is the statement of George V. Allen, Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern, South Asian and African Affairs, accompanied by Raymond Yingling, Assistant Legal Advisor, Department of State, and Leo G. Sear, Director, Office of African Affairs. Mr. Allen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last January, an announcement was made by the Department of State that it would be the policy of the United States to relinquish its right of extraterritorial jurisdiction in Morocco when the time became appropriate. This policy was approved by the president. The Secretary of State had discussed it briefly with the committee in the meeting here on the 6th of January and in a letter addressed to the chairman on the committee on January 24th, 1956. Mr. Chairman, I think a letter sets forth the situation very clearly. Unless you think it would be redundant, I would like to read that letter. Chairman, you may read. Mr. Allen. This is a letter addressed to Senator George as chairman of the committee on January 24th. Letter from the Secretary Dulles to Senator George. I would like to discuss in this letter a question of policy which concerns the relinquishment of our rights of extraterritorial jurisdiction in Morocco. Moroccans are moving rapidly towards independence. As this evolution takes place, their leaders have expressed the hope that we, the United States, will cease exercising in their country the rights of extraterritorial jurisdiction granted to the United States by treaty more than 100 years ago. Extraterritorial jurisdiction has for a long time has been a symbol of colonialism. For centuries, it was a traditional privilege of Western powers in Africa and Asian countries. Now it hardly exists anywhere. The United States has ceased to exercise such jurisdiction wherever it possesses, except in Morocco. Okay, before we turn this page, it's just a few things I just want to point out in
I
this
can
small
read.
section. So we see that there's a clear differentiation between the United States, right, and Moroccans. They labeled themselves as the United States, and they said Moroccans are moving towards independence, right? So that's one clear, obvious indication that these are two different governments, right? And then it also says that we'll cease exercising in their country, right? So the United, and we're stating the basics because a lot of people like to say the Kingdom of Morocco is the Moroccan Empire. Okay, well, let's just ask some few basic questions before we continue. Does the United States have jurisdiction over the Kingdom of Morocco? No. Remember, they granted their independence in 1956, same year this letter was written, right? So don't get that confused. But pay attention to the wordplay, okay? So that's one thing to call out, right? The United States having extraterritorial jurisdiction in Morocco, but we know it's not in the Kingdom of Morocco, right? So keep that in mind. And it also says the United States has ceased to exercise such jurisdiction everywhere except in Morocco. Why is this such? Because the whole world is Morocco. Turn the page. All right, the read continues to say, extraterritorial jurisdiction has ceased to have any substantial value, either in terms of American interest or Moroccan political desires. So there we have another differentiation between American and Moroccan, right? Says its relinquishment appears to me the only course in keeping with the high traditions of United States policy and with our sympathies for the aspirations of peoples moving along the road towards self-government. To retain this vestige of colonialism in the new Morocco will be contrary to the desires of the Moroccan people. It will open the United States to being attacked on the grounds of imperialism by hostile propaganda. And so I don't want to keep stopping every paragraph, but this paragraph is important
Go
because
ahead.
to retain this vestige of colonialism in the new Morocco. So let's take everything into consideration. The new Morocco, it could be referring to, right, is the Kingdom of Morocco. Let's take that consideration. This is 1956 that this conversation is being had, right? Kingdom of Morocco, got their independence in 1950. So let's take this into consider. Let's take everything, right? We know the Kingdom of Morocco is not the Moroccan Empire as well, so keep that in mind. So it says again, colonialism in the new Morocco. So again, this United States of America, are they exercising extraterritorial jurisdiction in the Kingdom of Morocco? No. So to retain this vestige of colonialism in the new Morocco, right? They have to retain it, meaning it's already there in the new Morocco, would be contrary to the desires of the Moroccan people. Okay, so the same year, the Kingdom of Morocco got their independence. It doesn't seem contrary to them, does it? They got their independence the same year. Okay.
Point of privilege. And
Yeah.
go ahead. Oh no, I just wanted to add on it. And I guess you start to read more of this document, you gonna understand if it wasn't no Moroccans where the Americans was gonna be, why would they need a agreement about Morocco?
Good point.
And point of interest,
Yes.
the last sentence say to retain this vintage of colonialism in the new Morocco will be contrary to the desire of Moroccan people. So they're pretty much saying if the United States remain there, it really accept the Moroccan people there. Is that pretty much what they're saying to retain this vintage type of colonialism the United States is offering? Well, it's not the desire of the Moroccan people.
Right. So what they're saying that their avenues of colonialism, such as extraterritorial jurisdiction, um, it will be contrary to our desires. So what they doing is not acceptable to us, basically. So what they're trying to do is keep that avenue of colonialism there. They're trying to retain it, right? They're trying to keep it where it is in the new Morocco, even though it's contrary to the Moroccan people.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
So then it goes to say
Good
it
idea.
will be open. It would open the United States to being attacked on the grounds of imperialism by hostile propaganda. So we're talking about
Right. Point of
propaganda.
interest. They don't. The people in Morocco don't want it there, but they insist on, like you said, practicing extraterritorial power.
Well, the United States doesn't have extraterritorial jurisdiction in the Kingdom of Morocco. That's the wordplay.
Right. Right.
They
Not
don't
in the
have
kingdom of Morocco,
jurisdiction
but
over there.
right, but in Morocco.
Right. So they trying to make it. They trying to double talk. Somebody got to get put on mute. Stuff in the background.
Like you said, they're trying to double talk. One meaning they say they're talking about the Morocco, then one minute they switch it and trying to talk about the Morocco kingdom. So
Right, the
we
Kingdom
can't
of
get it
Morocco.
confused. Got it. With that, I yield. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
One more point of privilege, and I want to add the Kingdom of Morocco. You could think about our territories here, like they had already started their independence, so they had gained it through the Kingdom of Morocco. It just started there. We just hadn't got it over here in the West, so that's
Right.
why they wasn't colonized. I yield.
And so the double talk, you see the hostile, where it says hostile propaganda, meaning the United States will be under fire if they try to retain this vestige of colonialism in the new Morocco. So they'll be under hostile propaganda. Why would they be under hostile propaganda? Where's the propaganda? Well, it's saying that the Kingdom of Morocco is the Moroccan Empire, never mentioning that this is the Moroccan Empire. Right. So it goes to say, I will propose, therefore, to make a public announcement in the near future that is the firm policy of the United States to seize extraterritorial jurisdiction in Morocco as soon as the time is appropriate. Following such announcement, which I feel is important to make as soon as possible, I intend to suggest to the Congress that is pass a joint resolution authorizing the president to relinquish the exercise of our rights of extraterritorial jurisdiction in Morocco at such time as deems proper. This procedure would, in my view, be an appropriate and effective method so far as concerns our Constitution to relinquish the exercise of our treaty rights of jurisdiction in Morocco. It will place this government in a position to move swiftly whenever it decided that the time had come to act. This particular procedure would not relinquish other rights granted to us in the treaties. Now that's a very important sentence. Let me read that again. This particular procedure would not relinquish other rights granted to us, i.e. the United States saying this, in the treaties. I have in mind principally our economic rights, especially our right to equality in treatment in commercial matters. Should it become necessary to modify our commercial relations with Morocco, this will be the subject of diplomatic negotiations. I enclose a memorandum describing in more detail the rights of extraterritorial jurisdiction now exercised by the United States in Morocco. That memorandum is in your records. Senator Nolan, Mr. Chairman, may I make some inquiries of Mr. Allen? Mr. Allen, I am in accord with the general policy the Secretary and the President have enunciated here, and I think it is vitally important in view of the recent developments in Morocco, in Moroccan relations with France and Spain. Okay, now we're going into a different section. All right. So what I'll try to do is read each section, and we'll discuss more after the section is over, instead of stopping at each paragraph. So it says, assuring Americans same privileges in Morocco as citizens of other countries. But I do hope that the department, as corollary to this, will take whatever steps are necessary to see to it that American citizens are going to have rights of citizens of any other country in Morocco. Any other country in Morocco, not the Kingdom of Morocco. Any other country in Morocco. I mean, if it is going to be an independent state, which I hope it is, that we then are treated on equal with any other non-Moroccan, and I hope that we will take steps to see that the treaties we do have, that we have do not become a dead letter now that we are dealing with the Moroccan government rather than the French government. Mr. Allen, you may be certain, Senator, that the Department of State has that very definitely in mind. I myself welcome the views that you have expressed on it. That is the thorough and full intention of the Department of State in any negotiations that may take place with the Moroccan authorities. There are some angles of the Moroccan situation that perhaps will have to be considered and discussed when particular matters have been handled. But those will not run counter to the very strong basic intention of the Department of State to see to it that American citizens continue to enjoy privileges in Morocco on a basis of equality with any other foreigners. Okay, so that's the start of another section. So let's go back to this section we just read. Okay.
Point of interest.
Yeah.
So in the section that the start of that section that you just read, in that reading, I heard something very interesting that I think would help with our perspective. The United States is not attempting in this document to secure or procure equal privilege or equal right with Moroccans. What they're fighting for is the ability to be treated just as well as any other foreigner in Morocco. So I think that's just another point that kind of identifies and points out who is who's the owner and who's the tenant. You know, I think it just becomes very, very clear in that particular paragraph. And then also, just one other point, they talked about how they wanted to seize the extraterritorial jurisdiction. That language itself kind of implies strategy at bare minimum, but in idealistic terms, it's probably dealing with a war tactic, right? When you think about seizing, you think about the federal government seizing drugs or seizing control of the compound. It's a seize. It's something that's you imposing and doing it by way of force. And so them doing that with extraterritorial jurisdiction within Morocco is another point of identification where you get a chance to understand the framework of the environment that we are decolonizing from. So it just puts things into perspective and kind of fine tunes your focus so you don't take it lightly. I yield with those comments.
Good points. And a few other things to call out is that here we see, let me see if I can highlight it. Okay. Any other country in Morocco. So again, we have a differentiation that can be made because how many countries are in the kingdom of Morocco? None. It's a country itself. So these U.S. representatives, they're not stupid, right? They're smart people. They know what they're talking about when they say any other country in Morocco. They're talking about the Moroccan Empire, right? It's countries, i.e. states, that establish independence, right? Establish state government, state laws, etc. So this we have more indications that Kingdom of Morocco is different than the Moroccan Empire. Also, them stating that they hope that the treaties that they have with us do not become a dead letter, right? Now dealing with the Moroccan government. So they're hoping that the Treaty of Peace and Friendship stays alive. Why? Because if it didn't, where would they go? Secondly, if it didn't stay alive, or if it wasn't still in force, full force and effect, who would be paying us rent? We would basically be saying we're self-sufficient enough that we have everything we need, personnel, everything, to do everything in our own, which, especially at that moment, at this moment, is not the case. So we'll start this next reading. Wazir, Kendon, do you mind reading this article for us?
Okay, as long. Why relinquish? Why relinquishment requested by joint resolution method? Senator Green, why is it better to do this by joint resolution than by revision of the treaty? That is a legal matter, Mr. Allen. That is a legal matter which has been discussed, Senator Green, many times at considerable length in the Department of State, and Mr. Yingling, who is a representative of Mr. Filger, the legal advisor of the Department of State, is here. Mr. Yingling, I think it could be done either way, Mr. Chairman, but I think there is precedent for doing it this way. It was done this way in the case of Egypt, where the Congress gave the president discriminatory authority to relinquish the jurisdiction we had there. If the Egypt would set up courts which were satisfactory to us, which would afford the measures of impartial justice comparable to that which American citizens then got in the council courts. So I think the reason is that it has been done this way before, and this is, I think, a particular apt way in this case because we have legislation here which we feel ought to be replaced. We could terminate the treaty and point of privilege. I want to point that out right fast. Do you all see how they're saying? I think particularly apt in way in this case because we have legislation here which we feel ought to be repealed, right? So they know they got colonial legislation. They trying to cover up what's going on. So this is what they talking about. Like how can they do it? We could terminate the treaty by protocol or by another treaty, which would get the advice and consent of the Senate. But that would not repeal the legislation, which is on the books, is on the record, which gives these council courts jurisdiction to try American citizens. I want to point that out right fast too. So, like, you see how they're saying, okay, well, we got the laws on the books, but it gives the council courts jurisdiction. And we just say Article 15. I pledge my full allegiance to the state. So, the laws of the United States, they don't apply to me. And, speeding, whatever, okay? And I tell them, hey, I'm not a citizen. I give you my identification. Right there, in that moment, the things that in their mind that they feel are legal in stance, right? They're going to take you to jail, do whatever they're going to do. But then on the flip side, the people who making the legislation, you see that they know certain legislation, it ain't right. It needs to be hidden. Senator Green, you mean the legislation is not dependent on the existence of treaties? Mr. Yingling, the exercise of it is, but I think that the treaty terminating this treaty or some act in the form of a treaty terminating this treaty of 1836 would not repeal the legislation. And just want to point that out. Y'all see how they talking about the treaty but not naming it. But they got the year. Now the legislation, of course, would stay on the books and just be useless. But we think it would be a needier and tidier job to repeal the legislation since we do not need it anymore. We have no capitulatory rights in any country now except Morocco. Senator Smith, Mr. Chairman, I just have one question. I'll read the next one right fast. Opposition to relinquishment. Mr. Secretary, is there opposition to this from any source? I am thinking especially of Mr. Rhodes, who has appeared every year to discuss some difficulties of Americans in Morocco. Mr. Allen, Mr. Rhodes has been in the forefront of people who have encouraged the independence of Morocco and has been working very closely and very harmoniously as far as I know with the leaders of Morocco who are so anxious to get us to give up the last benches of colonialism. Now, he just asked the question, Now you can kind of see more what I'm saying. Like, they was already decolonized. So you see, like they ready for them to get their rights. Mr. Rhodes. Mr. Rhodes, of course, is also an American businessman there who has the same interests that Senator Nolan has suggested. And he wants to be certain that we do not end up with American citizens having a less favorable position in Morocco. But on the question of extraterritoriality, my guess would be that Mr. Rhodes, let me see, okay, my guess would be that Mr. Rhodes would be the last to want to stand out against the earnest desires of the Moroccans to gain their independence in all aspects of independence. Certainly, as long as a foreign country, I want y'all to pay attention to this. As long as a foreign country has got extraterritoriality in Morocco will be subject to the most. Let me see. Morocco will be favored to the most violent criticism by the Arab states, which will call it a so-called independent country. Right? They would have made fun of us.
Point of
No, what's
interest.
fun that they call them the Arabs Moroccans, right?
Right,
Nowhere in their
right,
constitution they claim to be Moroccan, but they claim to be Arabic, right?
right. And so for Senator Nolan, we have apparently had some letters in from some American business groups in Morocco. Now,
Point of
whether
interest,
they
right
may be,
quick. Um, just on this first sentence, let's talk about criticism by other Arab states, which would call it a so-called independent country. So we basically have the Kingdom of Morocco, right, and other Arab states um, viewing the Moroccan states and our independence in a certain light that one would call the other a so-called independent country. So just as this United States is a so-called state, right, because it's a corporation in truth, um, these Arab states, here we go with this so-called independent country again. Okay, and then it says we'll experience violent criticism. Okay, why will we experience violent criticism or may experience violent criticism by Arab states, which would call us a so-called independent state country? Was because now we're pointing out who has committed genocide, et cetera, as we're decolonizing, including any Arab state. So, because we got to remember, Muhammad V was in on it. Many sultans were in on it as far as colonizing the Moors here. So now we have this term Arab states. They didn't say Moroccan. They said Arab states, right? So I just wanted to call that out and also pay attention to the last sentence that Wazir Kendon just read, where it speaks about these American business groups. All right, now I yield with that. Wazir, did you want to finish the read or? Well, I'll go ahead and finish it. No worries.
oh, okay, I'm saying I was trying to come out mute.
Okay, yeah, I'll finish it.
Okay.
So I reread this last one by Senator Nolan. We have apparently had some letters in from some American business groups in Morocco. Now, whether they may be confused in thinking that we are proposing to give up other treaty rights, dealing with economic aspects of it, rather than merely this, I do not know. but there apparently has been some objection raised. Are you familiar with it, Mr. Allen? There has been a concern expressed on the part of those American business interests who are really, I think, primarily keeping up the pressure as they normally and naturally would, to be certain that we would protect their interests as much as we can. Senator Mansfield. Mr. Chairman, could I ask a few questions? Chairman. Yes, Senator. So let's just ask a few questions before we continue. These American businesses who seem to be keeping up the pressure as they naturally would concerning the United States interests and their economic aspects. Who does this sound like?
The bankers.
I just want to ask that question to the floor. Who are these American business groups? Who could this narrow down to?
Armed forces.
The bankers.
Okay, any other answers? American business groups. Who could this be referring to? American business groups that's putting pressure on them as far as giving up treaty rights. So let's think about this. I'm gonna ask this question again. I'm gonna rephrase it and ask again. If these American business groups are saying, hey, your economic aspects and treaty rights, we need to rearrange that. It wouldn't be other Americans or people who say they're Americans, right? Why would America call out America on their own treaty rights and economic aspects and their rights to exercising it, right? That's like one Moroccan state coming at another Moroccan state. Hey, man, look, this treaty of peace and friendship act of Algeciras, man, nah, nah, we need to go backwards. So I'm gonna ask this question again. Who could this American business group that's putting pressure on the American government to say, hey, yo, economic aspects, this treaty right here, we need to have a talk. They putting pressure as they naturally would. So who would be naturally putting pressure on the Americans? That's my question to the floor.
Moors, Moroccans, those who are aware of their position and status.
I'm looking for a different answer, a more specific answer.
The British?
The United States.
No.
I was gonna say the colonizers.
Well, the closest answer was Moors, but the answer I was looking for was Moorish Americans.
Oh, Moorish Americans. Okay.
We have the civil Moors, right, doing business as organizations, the economic, do the trust and all this type of stuff, right? Municipal law Moors. The American business, right? Because they're seen as Americans. These American businesses in Morocco are putting pressure on the American government, saying, hey, this treaty right here, we need to talk about that. These economic aspects, we need to talk about that too. It says, but apparently has raised some objection. So they object their rights that the United States has been exercising. Why would another American object another American's rights as if they're trying to trample their own government, leaving the whole everybody stateless, right? Well, this is who I would say Moorish Americans. It says there has been a concern expressed on the part of those American business interests who are really, I think, primarily keeping up the pressure as they normally and naturally would. So naturally, they see why they're keeping up the pressure. But they're calling them American businesses as people in the American government themselves. Why are they talking like it's two different sides? right? But they said as they normally, meaning it's been going on and naturally would. So it says to be certain that would that we will protect their interests as much as we can. Okay, so you got to peep the wordplay. This section is the United States exercises extraterritorial jurisdiction only in Morocco. Senator Mansfield, I understand that this is the only country in the world where we have extraterritorial rights. Rights. They have extraterritorial rights, right? Why is that? Because the France versus United States of America court case, because the treaties, right? As treaties and res judicata. So it's Mr. Allen. It is the only country in the world where we exercise extraterritorial rights. There was a little bit of a debate. We had it in my own staff meeting the other day where I maintained that perhaps if we examine our treaty with Muscat with a fine-tooth comb, we could sustain the contention that we have extraterritorial rights in Muscat. It was a treaty negotiated by the naval captain in 1846. We did many of our negotiations with Saim and other areas by naval captains going out with letters from the president authorizing them to negotiate treaties here and there. But we never have had a consulate in Muscat during all of this time, and we never exercised any jurisdiction. Whether we could exercise it there or not, I do not know. Morocco is the only place where we practice it in the whole world today. Senator Mansfield. Mr. Secretary, am I correct in stating that we are the only power which does have these rights in Morocco? Mr. Allen, that is generally correct. So just again, we see that the basics is being reiterated. Okay. You see that they're talking about the exit. Oh, shoot. Oh, man, sorry. I clicked the arrow button. Hold on, let me get back to it. Let me get back to it. I think this is the page we were on. Uh, does anybody remember what page we were on? Maybe it was down here. But um,
That's the page, Akil.
okay, here it is. Okay. All right, so let's continue to read it. American bases in Morocco. Senator Mansfield. What about our American bases in Morocco? I understand we concluded arrangements with the French. Does this mean we will have to reopen those arrangements and carry on negotiations with the new Moroccan government? Mr. Allen, no, sir. The new Moroccan authorities have reminded us that when they come into their full independence, they will expect us to look at them for any negotiations regarding our bases. Well, that is normal. We expect that. But at the same time, when Morocco achieves its independence, we will expect Morocco to acknowledge and adhere to the international engagements which have been undertaken in her name before she became independent. That is normal when any country achieves its independent status. They're telling you what they expect, right? They expect us to engage in the prior engagements we have, active Algeciras, right? Treaty of Madrid, etc. Senator Mansfield, isn't it true that despite our request to the French, the Moroccan government was not notified or kept informed on any of the details concerning our acquisition of the 3 or 4 bases that we have in that country? Mr. Allen, there was no Moroccan government. There was no Moroccan government. So again, peep the double talk. There was no Moroccan government. That is no native independent Moroccan government at the time.
Islam. I ain't had nothing to say though. I was just saying that in general.
Okay. Wazir Kendon, do you mind reading while I get my daughter together?
I'll read it. It says, the French were conducting the foreign relations of Morocco by treaty right. We may debate whether it would have been wiser if the French at that time had consulted and taken into their counsels more of the local leaders. But the direct answer to your question is that you are correct in saying, as far as I am informed, that the French did not do that. Senator Mansfield, but we had asked them to. Mr. Allen, we expressed the view to the French that it would be more lasting and permanent and on a better basis if these agreements were entered into with the occurrences and knowledge of the local leaders. Yes. Man, I lost it. Oh, there it goes. Senator Mansfield. It is reasonable to assume, I believe, that the Moroccan government will also expect some additional funds for the use of these air bases. I understand that last fall, shortly after the Sultan was returned, he gave out a newspaper interview to that effect, that he not only anticipated additional negotiations, but perhaps additional funds as well. Do you have any information on that, Mr. Allen? Yes, Senator Mansfield, that is quite correct. I think I ought to point out for the record that while I am delighted to discuss any aspect of the Moroccan question, this question of our basis, there is not, I believe, entirely germane to this question of extraterritoriality. But we will have to be talking with the Moroccan leaders about our basis. There's no doubt about that. Then it says deleted. Senator Mansfield. Now there's another question I wanted to ask. Status of Tangier. In talking about extraterritorial rights in Morocco, what about the special status of Tangier under the Treaty of Algeciras? What are we going to do about giving up that particular part of Morocco to which the Moroccans undoubtedly will lay claim if they have not already? Mr. Allen, I am glad you brought that up. I was going to come to that in the remaining part of my discussion, but it is an entirely pertinent point. As the members of the committee are aware, Morocco, the territory of the Sultan of Morocco, is divided into 3 zones: the French zone, the Spanish zone, and the international city of Tangier. Each of those zones has a somewhat different history and a somewhat different treaty status. The French government agreed to grant independence to Morocco in January. The Spanish government has agreed to recognize just 2 days ago the independence of Morocco. Incidentally, the Sultan of Morocco has visited his dominions in the Spanish zone of Morocco yesterday, as you perhaps have seen in the press for the first time in 3 generations.
All right quick. Where it says each of the zones has a somewhat different history and somewhat different treaty status. So we're talking about Morocco obviously all three of these zones, but it talks about how each one has a different treaty status. Now, why is that? Because treaties such as the Treaty of Fez, all the Moorish treaties, in which as each one started to the Spain, right, Spanish colonizers, they gave up their capitulatory rights at one point in time. France had their situation with the Treaty of Fez and the independence of Kingdom of Morocco in that whole time period. So that was just France and Morocco, right? And then you had Tangier, in which all of this is Morocco, but all of them, as it says, has somewhat a different treaty status. Okay, so that's very important to keep in mind. Okay, because as it said up here, it says to which the Moroccans undoubtedly will lay claim. It's talking about Tangier, right? So they're saying that the United States has a certain status over this territory, and just like anywhere else in Morocco, the Moroccan Empire, or in the world, Moroccans can lay claim, right? Because you see that they're worried about this country in Morocco. So if we know that the whole world is Morocco, and we see that they're concerned about them laying claim, right? Due to this act of Algeciras, this special status, right? That they're looking at the whole world that way. So you don't just look at one thing or one area. Look at the entire frequency of what's being said, right? So let's get back up here so we can continue. All right, reader, if you like to continue, I appreciate that.
Okay. I am not certain exactly how that comes about because the Spanish protectorate over Spanish Morocco is 44 years old. He was received with great acclaim in the city of Tetun, the principal city of Spanish Morocco.
Point of interest. All right, so it says, I am not certain exactly how that comes about. So they confused about something. He said, I'm not sure exactly how this comes about because the Spanish protectorate over in Spanish Morocco is 44 years old. So they talking about the Sultan and how the Sultan, let's just go back and I'll just read it word for word. I truthfully forgot wording. But it's double speech we're talking about here because it says, incidentally, the Sultan of Morocco has visited his dominions in the Spanish zone of Morocco yesterday. So hold on. The Sultan of Morocco visited his dominions, right? So he just visited Morocco, right? It says in the Spanish zone of Morocco yesterday, as you perhaps have seen in the press, for the first time in 3 generations. So Sultan hasn't been in the Spanish zone in 3 generations. But let's see the double talk. Because if he hasn't been there in 3 generations, some people are confused because they continue to say, I am not certain exactly how that comes about because the Spanish protectorate over Spanish Morocco is 44 years old. He was received with great acclaim in the city of Toutan, the principal city of Spanish Morocco. So they're saying they're not sure exactly how the Sultan for 3 generations did not visit his dominions. But then they go to say because the Spanish protectorate is over Spanish Morocco is 44 years old. So they're talking about jurisdiction, the wordplay of jurisdiction. They're confused How did the Sultan of Morocco not visit Morocco? They're saying of Morocco, in Morocco, etc. So they're confused how for 3 generations, if you're in Spain, Morocco, etc., it's a jurisdiction game. Just the Wizard of Oz, overnight, you're in America, now you're in Morocco. So people can be confused just like today. How are you in Morocco? Morocco is over there, etc., etc. Now, people are confused, just like right here. We see that they have a 44-year-old protectorate, a treaty. How is it that the Sultan of Morocco for 3 generations, if we're just talking jurisdiction, never visited this? Because jurisdictions change just like that. Independence, okay, jurisdiction changed just like you're out of the Wizard of Oz. So let's just modernize this question. How did you leave America if you're standing right here? Oh, okay, you started a state. The average person might not pick up on that though. So you got to peep what they're saying here. They're not being concise as to what's going on, but them questioning it. If a Moor doesn't know, nobody knows.
Yes, sir.
Specifically ones in statehood. That's the top tier of everything. There is nothing higher than this. No spiritual technique, no nothing.
Excuse me, I got just a point of interest real quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Like, cause like I've just gotten this I guess feedback or whatever on the statehood aspect. And then that whole thing is, oh, Moors aren't Muslims. So I'm not gonna help the Moors with the state government because they're not Muslims. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, and then I'm looking at all these treaties, these international law meetings. They don't even really speak about religion. So I'm left confused. Like what are you talking about? You know, like is like religion really a topic of discussion? You know what I'm saying? Or is it like some just kind of dissonance type thing going on? I guess I yield with that. Yeah, I yield with that.
Point of privilege. Like as the deeper you get into this information, you will start to understand the psychological game they inflict on your mind and make you decide between your rights and religion. That's really what's taking place. So you could have someone saying, hey man, they putting the legislation on you, got felonies, they're taking your property. You can learn about your nationality and your rights, and better your life and better your family. And someone to say, well, if it's not going to put me in a better place when I get to heaven, then I don't want to hear it. But that's the position they put a person in psychologically. So that's one aspect. And the next aspect is the Christian and the Muslim. The Muslim is connected to your rights. But if you're a Muslim, you're not a Christian and you don't believe in God. That's what they did. And it's not right. But that I yield.
So just like a confusion thing, like a confusion psyop type of thing that gets everybody off the tracks, I guess. Yeah, that's what it seems like.
Pretty much, exactly. They understood the psychological aspect that the divine had over a person. You know what I mean? And I have a document. It's I have a document, but it's speaking about what is the name of it? Someone help me. It's the I think it's called the Doctrine of Discovery, if I'm not mistaken. But this doctrine is speaking about how the Roman and the Catholic came over here and they inflicted Christianity, and it was like an inside joke, right? Once they got someone to say, "Oh, I'm a believer," and try to convert someone, they laugh and like, "Man, we got us one. He finna go convert many as we need." That's how they're speaking in the document about religion. So they use it as a tool. With that, I yield.
And then they use government to kind of aid that and make make people submit because you got to turn the other cheek type deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I'm coming to terms with because it's like it's no reason to argue back and forth with a situation like that when it's like, well, you know what I'm saying. So yeah, I feel what you're saying when you say that. Yeah.
Mhm. Just we've been manipulated.
Right. And just to briefly build on top of what's all been said here as far as religion and government, you know, many of us know that religion was used to divide. You know, religion, it can be good just like it can be bad. Two sides of everything. Um, However, we know that if we read a treaty, we see Muslim, Mohammedan, Moroccan, Moor. Um, so we have to ask ourselves, why was this term Muslim incorporated in the treaties? Well, we have to do our studies as far as, when the Moroccan government itself was infiltrated. And for what reason would religion be or religious aspects be incorporated in the treaty, spearheading things, it seems like. For one, the Moroccan government was an Islamic government that used religion to spearhead things for a long time. But again, religion brings division. So who do you think infiltrated the Moroccan government and utilized this wordplay, incorporated in their doings, and began exercising division? Well, the quote unquote, we got the whole
Huh.
Berber and the Arab situation,
Oh,
right? So we got the Arabs, right? The quote unquote the most hardcore Muslims. There is no more Muslim than that, right? What this energy signature is giving off is very telling because again, we have the treaty saying, hey,
right.
this Muslim owns this, and this Muslim owns that, and this Moroccan is synonymous with Muslim. Okay, that's nice. And for a long time, you see why religion reigned as such, with religion as the head, and then we can even incorporate it with a certain people. It gives a certain energy. When you think Muslim, for a long time, people thought a specific people with a specific phenotype, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Stereotype. Why is that? The energy is very telling, very telling. So, so just to finish that, it was basically used to bring division. For any government in the world, there is no religion that's spearheading. It's religion that's being protected by the government, not the other way around. So this is bringing the separation of church and state, et cetera, et cetera. So in truth, that you be whatever religion you want to be, right? When
Right.
we start Moroccan states, it's up to us to determine what does black mean, what does Muslim mean, what does Islam mean, et cetera, et cetera. Rewrite our own narrative.
Yeah, I think like if like a lot of things need to be like tucks. Like everybody wanna stand on like this Indian thing and Muslim thing and this that thing. Like I don't think people gotta understand like we gotta tuck all that and lead with the government. You know what I'm saying? I think that's be better for people to understand that. Not us on the call, of course, but just the future. Yeah.
Yeah, I get you. Just read. It says the status of the international city of Tangier is still a different thing. Tangier is governed by a council of 8 nations, which runs the municipality under a local sort of city manager and arranging the treaty relationships with all the 8 nations which are in Tangier, with a good deal more complicated affair than the French or Spanish zones of Morocco. That will be the evolutionary process. The Sultan himself and the Moroccans, so far as I know, have not made any detailed arrangement or announcement as to how they will go about it, beyond the general statement that they think the Sultan's authority and the new independent Moroccan authority ought to extend to all three zones. But we will have a complicated picture, a much more complicated picture about Tangier than the other two zones. Senator Nolan, do you recall offhand what other countries are involved in the Tangier agreements? Mr. Allen. Well, Britain, France, Belgium, Spain, and the United States, Portugal, Netherlands, Italy. That is right. Deleted. Senator Mansfield. But then, as I understand it, this abolishment, yeah.
Pardon my interruption. Please let me make one point of interest that I think we would all do well to keep at the forefront of our brains. That list, would you mind reading that again? The list of those nations that are part of the Tangier Agreement?
Britain, France, Belgium, Spain, the United States, Portugal, Netherlands, and Italy.
All right. So it would do us well to recognize that those nations already have equal, if not more, interest in our national continued ignorance than support. So in the process of going through this international thing, it'd be do us well to recognize that those are allies of the individuals who have conspired to put us in the circumstances and the situations that we're in collectively. So I think that's just a point. It rang real loud in my head. It's like, okay, those are the ones who, and if you think about it, we know that Belgium is De Beers and France is a part of De Beers as well. And that's just one corporation that has national ties to both economic advancement and social and political and actually organic um, uh, oppression. Like we look at Sierra Leone, we look at DR Congo, and then we look at the companies and the countries and the nation states that are participating in that. And as we do so, we get a chance to actually recognize their tactics, and then we can also prepare for those. I yield there.
Good points, by the way. Let's see. Where was okay, I think I was right here. Senator Mansfield. But then as I understand it, this abolishment of extraterritoriality in Morocco would not apply to Tangier. Would Minister Holmes still have the right to carry on court proceedings in which Americans were interested, to hand down sentences and not dispense justice? He does have the right at the present time, doesn't he? I see some people shaking their heads. I would like to get their reactions. Mr. Allen. Yes, it is expected that the abolishment of extraterritoriality will apply to all three zones. Senator Mansfield. But is it true that Minister Holmes at the present time does have the right to dispense justice in Tangier? Mr. Allen. That is right. But he is the only foreign minister in Tangier who does have that right. Because again, the United States is the only one exercising extraterritoriality in Morocco. So this is being everything is being calculated as far as statehood goes, right? Because you got the Kingdom of Morocco solidifying their boundaries, but then you have the Moroccan Empire itself. So you have the Sultan who gave up his positions as Sultan. So now that, in truth, if the whole world is Morocco, not only do you have to contemplate on the Kingdom of Morocco, but the setting of the rest of the world in its entirety, or at least to some degree, right? So that's what's being discussed here, right? The 3 different zones and the extraterritoriality being lifted, them having rights still in Tangier, et cetera, et cetera. They're taking everything in consideration. Okay, it says, we are not, or we are alone in that. The others have given up their extraterritorial rights to the municipal judicial system. Senator Mansfield. He is the only one in Tangier, Mr. Allen. Yes, sir. Ah, shoot. Okay. Mr. Yingling, if I might interrupt, I do not understand that there is any rent as such, Senator Landry. How many bases have we in Morocco now? And what are we paying for them, Mr. Yingling? There are about a half dozen air bases, I think. Somebody got to put themselves on mute.
You
President Biden, especially.
Right. Mr. Sear, there are 4 air bases and 1 naval air activity. Mr. Yingling, I do not understand that we pay rent on them as such. In fact, I do not know any place in the world where we pay rent on military bases. It is contrary to the policy of the government to pay rent for bases as such. All right. This section is the question of jurisdiction over American forces stationed in Morocco. Senator Nolan, might I ask this question, which to me becomes more important than even the rental problem? We know, or we now have American personnel on these 4 air bases and 1 naval base. We are preparing to give up our extraterritorial rights on the trial of these people. Now, 2 questions occur to me. First, what type of judicial system do they have in Morocco? And second, what becomes of the jurisdiction of our American military personnel in the absence of a status of forces treaty in view of the transfer from French to Moroccan sovereignty? Okay, so let's take a pause right quick. There is 2 questions. One, first, what type of judicial system? Right, so we know that by way of consular courts and consular courts only, can the Moroccan states enforce Morocco. So this is basically saying that, for one, we got to go through the fire. Right, it's not just going to be a, hey, I got paperwork and now I eat a life. Like, no, you got experience. So what type of judicial system? Well, these are questions that if we know that by
we
way
need
of
a lot of pictures, dropping that on it, a lot of them, all over.
somebody
Pictures,
got to put themselves on mute.
While you're dropping it, while you're dropping it on there, you be taking pictures.
Okay. So the judicial system, all of what is in place right now as we speak. We have the WRC, we have the RSC. Now, granted, a lot of these things are not being exercised as much as the other ones, other organs, but this is what's in place. So they're asking what type of judicial system, right? And also, what becomes of the jurisdiction of their American military personnel? Okay, well, we know that dealing with decolonization, the military is what determines if they're colonized or not, right? So, being that the United States is a corporation and they're in truth not the United States of America, who will lay claim to what is on that landmass, whether it's a base, etc.? It will be the de jure state. specifically the Moroccan States. Rent, right? They're not who pays rent. Well, until the Moroccan government, being that they're in Morocco, and the Treaty of Peace and Friendship was all about commerce and paying rent and all that, that they're not familiar because we haven't been in our seats collecting the rent. Right? So it says the personnel, right, the military, in the absence of the status of forces treaty in view of the transfer from Moroccan from French to Moroccan sovereignty. So we're talking about the Treaty of Fez, the protectorate, right? The French had the power to right. Only because the French were power of attorney of Moroccan affairs. And if you're power of attorney of Moroccan affairs, then you off gate are governing the United States. It just trickles down. So I'll yield the floor to someone who would like to read while I get my daughter right. So if anybody would like to read, starting off right here with Mr. Allen.
Mr. Allen, that is also a matter that I had in my statement. I had not come to it yet, but I am glad to talk to it right now. Our soldiers on our bases in Morocco are governed by a status of forces agreement entered into with France in 1950, and that contains more than is in these capitulatory rights. Deleted. But the transition from French control in Morocco to Moroccan control, certainly in every legal sense, will not jeopardize or detract one iota from the jurisdictional rights that we have with regard to our soldiers at the present time. Senator Nolan, the reason for my inquiry is that in the average Western countries where there are well-established systems of justice that have been created and a regular court systems, even though the French system is different from our Anglo-Saxon system, we at least know what it is. However, when you get into some of these other countries first acquiring their independence, I think it becomes quite pertinent to us, wherever we have substantial numbers of Americans. Substantial number of Americans over there, as to the kind of justice they will receive when these men are charged with offenses committed away from their bases in non-military activities. Mr. Allen, Mr. Yingling will speak to that. Mr. Yingling, Senator, I would not suppose there would be any change in the courts by which these soldiers would be tried merely because of the independence of Morocco or the giving up of the capitulations. At the present time, those courts have jurisdiction as a matter of right under the 1950 agreement and the 1948 Civil Affairs Agreement with France. Their practice is to waive their jurisdiction in, I think, about 70% of the cases. Now, as we all know, the fact that Morocco becomes independent or has become independent is not going to enable it to exercise that independence fully for some time to come.
All right, real quick. So just to speak on this 1950 arrangement or agreement, this is all between France, the UK, and Morocco, right? This agreement in 1950 between France and Morocco, and then we see that 70% of their cases, they're looking, 70% of their cases they were looking to have waived, right? So what's going on here? Well, we have one state making agreements with another state because of their coming out of colonization. Therefore, the state that had the upper hand has to turn around and make sure everything else with their agreements and all other states are in alignment. Makes sense. So this agreement was all about the military. It was a military agreement, and how, again, 70% of these cases, this agreement assisted in 70% of these cases being waived when it comes to jurisdiction. Okay, so we're talking about coming out of colonialism, right? So I just wanted to share that point because that's the only part where it speaks on the 1950 agreement. All right, Andres, is that you reading?
Yeah, it's me, but I'm about to have to stop because I kind of got some background noise.
Okay. All right.
All
Well,
right.
would anybody else like to go ahead and read?
I'll read. Where are we reading from?
Right here.
Relinquishment of consular from I mean.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, they are going to need the assistance of institutions which are already established there, and they are going to need the assistance of the French. Well, nobody can guarantee this. I think the reasonable assumption is that the same courts which have been trying members of our armed forces in Morocco will continue to do so for some considerable time to come. If at any time the situation should give indication of changing, we can, as Secretary Allen has said, enter into negotiations with the Moroccans the same as we do every place else. As the senator knows, he is quite familiar with the NATO status of forces and so forth. We are in constant review of these jurisdictional situations in every country in the world, not just in Morocco. And at any time when we thought our people were in danger of being subjected to some jurisdiction which did not afford the basis for a fair trial or for an impartial system of justice, I think the State Department would be very sensitive to that and would be very quick to do something about it. Senator Nolan, of course, as you know, the Senate, after some considerable discussion, finally ratified the status of forces agreements, but with some misgivings. There were some points raised here in this committee and elsewhere on additional safeguards that we had hoped would be included in any future negotiations that might take place. It is, of course, one thing when an American civilian voluntarily as a businessman or as a traveler goes into a country, but it is quite another, I think, when we draft Americans and send them into a country. We have an added obligation to make sure that under whatever system of justice they are being brought, they will have adequate safeguards. And I would hope again that the department will review the question that were raised in the committee at the time the status of forces agreement was before us, and see to it that we will not necessarily follow some of the language in previous agreements that we had, which left a little nublous, to say the least. Senator Mansfield, I think Senator Nolan has a good point there because some of us are worried about the type of justice dispensed in Arab countries. Although we do have a base in Arabia and in Libya, I am quite certain that the status of forces agreement do not apply to those countries. If Morocco becomes independent with the system of Arab justice, I assume we might wish to regain control of our own people for all types of crimes. I would certainly expect the State Department to consider that factor, because the withdrawal of French law, if it is withdrawn, and the substitution of Arabic law would face us in a very embarrassing position if the Moroccans carried on the agreement we entered into with France. Mr.
Point of interest.
Yes.
So one thing that the United States is saying is that they're concerned that the Moroccan states are going to incorporate a very harsh justice system. You know, if you steal something, you get your hand cut off, type of thing. So, what they don't want to see, what they're hoping, right, is that we don't take it back to ancient times and things get brutal again. Right? But somebody got to put themselves on mute. Okay. So they're hoping that our justice system is fair, right? They're scared about the substitution of Arabic law. Okay, so just keep that in mind because this is one indication why we shouldn't just pick up where we left off in a form as if it's not a new day and age.
But
There's
at the
things
same
we have
time, excuse me,
to.
but at the same time that this was written, they were practicing what they were speaking out against
Right.
with
That
us.
too.
Yes. So they're complete hypocrites.
And I'm not sure if I don't think we read the part that I'm about to say, but somewhere in this document it speaks about how the United States will be very, very embarrassed once the world sees that, you know, they haven't been practicing what they've been preaching. You know, everybody else is, hey, practice democracy, but them. So I'll yield with that and we can continue.
Okay. Mr. Yingling. See, is that where I left off at? Yes, I would say to the senator that he is quite right. I mean that we would be very quick to do something to meet that sort of situation. I happen to be very familiar with the Saudi Arabian arrangement, and the situation there is that while we do not have exclusive jurisdiction, we do have jurisdiction in all of those areas which are frequented by our forces. In other words, an American soldier in Saudi Arabia, the geographical situation being what it is, cannot get out of that area except on a plane, maybe to leave the country. I think if there were a movement by the Moroccans to set up different courts than they have now, courts dispensing Muslim law rather than the French law or the system that they have now, I think that we would then consider whether we should not enter into negotiations to revise the arrangement we have now deleted. Mr. Allen, may I say just a word? Mr. Chairman, off the record on the subject, and then they had a discussion off the record. And I love when they say deleted because it's probably something very incriminating or revealing that they had to delete.
Right.
Senator Langer, Mr. Chairman, I am not satisfied by Mr. Allen's answers to Mr. Nolan's question in regard to the air bases and the way the personnel is treated as to what the future may bring forth for them. I wonder if we could have that clarified. The chairman. Yes, Mr. Allen. Senator Langer, are we going to have a long base on these air bases or aren't we? I mean, a long lease on these air bases or aren't we? Is the personnel going to be treated properly? Mr. Allen, Senator, we may have difficulties about those bases. It is not beyond the realm of possibility at all. We negotiated the arrangement with France, and the new Moroccan leaders are inclined to say, well, now this is our country. We are perfectly happy to have you Americans here, but we want it clearly understood that your arrangements in the future have got to be with us and not with France. And he's absolutely right on that. This is just one of the things, yes?
No, I was agreeing with you.
Oh, okay. That is just one of the things that we have got to face in this general movement of nations towards independence. I might just ask, what would be the alternative? What course could we take other than being glad that the Moroccans have achieved this status of independence? Again, deleted. The question of extraterritorial jurisdiction goes to the very heart of whether Morocco is an independent state or not. If we turned around and said, in effect, that we are going to cling to it, having been the only country that has held on to the extraterritoriality now for a number of years, that we are going to hold to that, which is the emblem of colonialism in a sort of uncivilized country, that the United States is going to hold on to this tightly unless you give us what we want with regard to the establishment of our bases there. That is going to put us in the position of threatening that we are going to be the most important imperialistic power in the world until we get what we want in regard to their bases. That is a question of Senator Langler, but we haven't built those bases over there. But haven't we built those bases over there? Haven't the American taxpayers invested their money in the air bases? Mr. Allen, yes, sir. Senator Langler, why would they not have a long-term lease? Mr. Allen, they would have a long-term lease, and we want to do everything we possibly can to get such a lease. We feel that the way to get the Moroccans back up the quickest and jeopardize any chance of decent relations with the Moroccans in negotiations is to hold this worn-out capitulatory regime that goes back 100 years in Morocco as a club. That surely would set the Moroccans off in a way that would make the negotiations, in my opinion, impossible.
Okay, well, let's take a pause right there. A club, impossible negotiations from a club, all because of club. Now, what this sound like? I'll ask y'all. What does this sound?
A bunch of BS.
Yeah, for sure.
They're trying to figure out how are we going to work around the Moroccan sovereignty with them coming back into power? How are we going to maneuver ourselves to where we stay important on the top and all of our everything we want matters we hold on to? That's what they're trying to do.
Also to note that though the United States being one state as a colonizer, or the United States of America, more specifically, um, we also see that not only are they colonizing the Moroccans, obviously working together within their state, but while they're steadily trying to call out other states for their colonial tactics, they're working together to continue colonizing the Moors at some point in time in some degree.
Mm-hmm.
So we have you seen the meme with the Spider-Man pointing to the other Spider-Man that's pointing to the other Spider-Man. It's they're saying, hey, I want all the cake.
Yep.
And I'm gonna call you out,
Mm-hmm.
right, for trying to call me out about eating the cake.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We just gonna keep on playing that game.
Yep.
Why would they say a club? We talking about treaties, states, and they talking about clubs and negotiations. We know what's going on, right? A lot of we know all these Masonic type of Freemason type of groups, right? Even our own people, which is the absolute problem because if anybody's gonna do something, it's our people, right? The Moorish American teachers, right? So you see how they're breaking it down. They're saying that where they would take off as far as negotiations, right? They already asked about the judicial system. Okay, we got the RSC at the very least for now, right? Um, as well as other questions they're asking about the military and paying rent, right? Okay, I got a number for you according to the active Algeciras, right? So all of what they're asking, if these are the depth of their is this the if this is the depth of their questions, the depth of their knowledge, in which much of it we see we're ready for. What is that teaching you? What is that telling you? The very basics of our knowledge is going to blow the mind, the general population, just the basic knowledge, the basics. So I just wanted to call out how they highlighted this club and trying to make sure to set Moroccans off in a way that would make negotiations impossible. Right. So this is teachers from the Moorish Science Temple of America not being told certain treaties and what the negotiations are supposed to include. Right. Okay. So we're going to start off reading. Um, I'm not sure exactly how far we'll get. We'll probably close out. Let's see, we started it. So we'll probably go for about another hour. And Makar, at any time when you're tired, just let me know and we'll switch it up.
All right. Senator Nolan, well, of course, I fully agree with you. I think the thing has to be very gingerly handled, but we are in a little different position, actually, than some of the other powers. For better or for worse, they do not have 4 bases, and I have a naval base out there. They do not have their citizens who have been drafted and sent out there contrary, perhaps in many cases, to their own free will and accord. They have private individuals, to be sure, citizens who have gone out to conduct business and so on. So that we are in a different position perhaps than the British or the Italians or even the Spanish. Now, it does seem to me that there is a question here, and we are raising it in the Foreign Relations Committee because it may break out on the floor of the Senate, and we are merely trying to explore it with you.
All right, point of interest. So we see that they say that their position is different than that of the Italians, Spanish, British, etc., because those are the states that relinquished their rights in Morocco, right? So we see that in the Act of Algeciras, there's specific fixed numbers and language in which only um, these states that's been previously mentioned, right? Even after that point, even after the Act of Algeciras in 1906, they began to relinquish rights in several different ways. Um, Therefore, the fixation of the numbers as far as how much we can tax the United States or even Britain is different. Those two will be different because the United States is still um, they still have their name on the document, right? With these fixed numbers, whereas everybody else is free game. We can put a number to it. Okay. So I just wanted to call that out, and I yield with that.
Would it not be possible now that Morocco is achieving independence to open some negotiations, at least tentatively, with the Moroccans to see what this base situation is going to be? If perchance their system of justice became the Arabic law rather than the French law with which we are familiar, I think there would be some very grave repercussions in the country and in the Congress on it if we gave up something which is a protection and incidentally was not obtained from the French, but from whatever government there was in 1836. The Moroccans cannot claim this was a colonial concession. I mean, in the sense that it came through France to us. It came from the Sultan of Morocco, and I think it would be a grave mistake if we were to give it up before we had tentatively found out whether we were going to be able to protect these Americans personnel that are over there. Now, the president has stated, and I think quite properly, that the Secretary of State, that we are preparing to abandon this. But I also believe it is not entirely unreasonable to consider the matter of quid pro quo. Now, you may tie it directly to this thing, but I think we at least ought to know whether these people are going to be prepared to give our forces some reasonable protection in the way of justice before we expose American soldiers to a system under which their hands may be cut off for theft. While we cannot complain about the laws of other countries beyond our jurisdiction, we do have a vital interest in Americans, and we must remember that many of them are not there of their own free will and accord. Mr. Allen, Senator, I want to say that these remarks you have made are, I think, entirely pertinent and proper. I want to point out one thing. As far as these capitulations are concerned, this extraterritorial treaty in 1836 has in it a provision that can be denounced by either side in 1 year. So it is not much of a bargaining weapon, in fact, because if we began to threaten to hold onto these capitulations until we get these base rights, we would in fact not only muddy the waters in our negotiations for the base rights, we would immediately provoke a declaration of denunciation of the capitulations as to termination in 1 year.
So check out what's being said. They gotta be careful. They saying they gotta be careful about these colonial tactics because it might mess up this treaty that's on a year by year basis. Meaning that, okay, you want to practice colonization 1 more year? Okay, we got the power to terminate this treaty. Now what? Right? So this is chess moves. A lot of people saying, hey, you really think this is gonna work? Yeah. Why? Because even themselves are saying they're saying it themselves. What's going to work and what's not going to work. They don't want to muddy the waters. It's on a year-to-year basis. Talk about a chess move, right? So what is this going to do? Well, it's obviously going to change things, but it's going to cause them to act right more than they may even want to. Yeah. Because again,
One of the things too that comes to my mind when you're saying this about the basis too, because the Act of Algeciras is about us scaling back the weaponry, scaling back the war power, the war initiatives, the war actions. So their first concern is to keep their war actions.
If we can continue to read, I'll put myself on mute and go to the next section.
Okay, at the end of that time, we would not have anything that we thought we had in our hand. We would open our hand and find it was empty, and we would have muddied our relations in trying to negotiate a decent arrangement on the base rights. Senator Nolan, I see that, and of course, we can explore this a little further with the Appropriations Committee, but I rather suspect that at one time the French were willing that we get in there with a base, and they had another discussion off the record. You want me to continue?
Yeah, I'll move it down here. Ah, shoot. Oh man. What's up?
Timing of relinquishment. Mr. Allen, we will presumably be coming before this committee for the nomination of an ambassador to Morocco within a few weeks or even earlier. Furthermore, this action that the president is requesting that you take is not for the purpose of giving up these rights immediately. The resolution says, quote, at the appropriate time, unquote. And the reason, one of the chief reasons that we suggest this arrangement is that in all probability, the time to do that may well be at the time when the Senate is not in session. The purpose, of course, is to clear up the legal position to give the President and the Secretary of State a position in which they can negotiate. Senator Langier, how long have you been with the State Department, Mr. Allen? Mr. Allen, next week it'll be 20 years.
So this at an appropriate time, which has been said quite a few times starting off this read. They kept saying extraterritorial jurisdiction will be relinquished at an appropriate time. That's what they kept saying. So what's an appropriate time? And why are they saying this? Well, appropriate time, for one, is when we're ready and when the law says it's appropriate. So, i.e., when we go to court. For two, this at an appropriate time, they're trying to stall, deny, and defend. Because they're speaking as if it's the United States policies and legislation, etc., that have to be more in alignment than these treaties and the state laws of the Moroccan states, etc., which are paramount to these paramount period, especially as it relates to the United States policies and whatever they got going on. So this at an appropriate time is them saying, okay, yeah, we see it coming, but we'll try to stall, deny, and defend, right? Hopefully the president and Senate is in session, et cetera, and all this type of stuff. So they're trying to say, okay, well, we got a few questions before we turn this thing over. Is your judicial system right? What's going to happen to the American military bases, et cetera, right? These were questions they were asking.
So if they're asking those questions and you know, like with the, and we get a reply, oh, we're going to shut those down. Are they going to say, well, oh no, time's not appropriate now?
Well, they can say that, but you know, at that point, that would be an opinion.
Mhm.
No substantive weight. Because they had so many years to do what they should have did. That once we take it to court, it will absolutely hold no weight.
Yeah,
Plus, they're
I always see which way they're coming. They're always coming sideways and at an angle. Okay.
yeah, they do it.
hmm Okay. Senator
Uh,
Langer. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you speaking?
I want to just make a quick point of interest, and if they tried to use that, that would kind of put them in conflict with the Charter of the United Nations. With that, I yield.
And they were already in conflict with that. They are already been in conflict with that. But okay, Senator Langer, I never could understand why, when Russia had all the land around Berlin and all the land around Vienna, we could not even have a road in there. It seems to me the dumbest farmer would not buy a 40-acre patch and be surrounded by somebody else and not have a road in there. In connection with these air bases in Spain, I understand they are going to raise the price, the rent, in a short time on the bases we have over there. As Senator Nolan said, we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars in building those bases and apparently have no authority over them. On some of the bases in some of the other countries, I understand we pay the money and build them, but the government, of course, owns the land on which they are located. I noticed that in Canada a while ago, some of the Northwest airplanes could not even get permission to land on some of the bases that we built. Now, who has charge of all that in the State Department? Mr. Allen, well, this whole question you mentioned, first, the situation in Berlin goes back to an arrangement made in 1945 between the military commanders in Germany. On the question of bases, it is under the Secretary of State in joint action with the Defense Department and the National Security Council. These questions have been thrashed out in the greatest detail over a long period of time as to whether we would have bases in Spain, bases in Morocco, the whole NATO complex, the infrastructure which you have heard about, the building up NATO facilities in Europe. This is interwoven in the whole complex of the conduct of the foreign relations of the United States over the last 10 years. If you want to point a finger at who has charge of that in the Department of State, it would just have to be the Secretary of State.
Point of
Senator
interest.
Lang, okay.
Yeah, I just want to speak on NATO, right? Many of these organizations, such as NATO, came into existence after the United Nations was established, or even the League of Nations before it became the United Nations. But specifically as it relates to NATO, which was created in 49, we're talking about an organization that focuses on military support, right? The operating of militaries, the control of militaries, to contradict the United Nations in its aspects as it relates to military, right? And colonization. So we got the same colonial powers coming together in different international organizations to execute different aspects to stall, deny, and defend, basically. in some shape, form, or fashion. So you got to just look at the timeline, the dates when things were started. Look at the reason for these organizations and other things that were started, right? Basically, put two and two together, because we know that after the United Nations Charter, which kicked off to a higher degree, we then see all these civil rights activities and all these international organizations being made for a certain reason. And we got to think, what reason is that? Well, look at what they're based on. That'll be the uh, contrary reason. Okay, I'm not saying that every organization is like this, but this is how we have to measure things. But with that, I yield.
Senator Langer, I never could understand how Russia's diplomats could go in and get all the territory, for example, around Vienna. Senator Nolan or I, when we were over there, had to land in Russian territory with Russian soldiers and could not even go into it unless we had permission from Russia. Senator Mansfield, Senator Langer, I think maybe about Berlin, it might be a good idea to drop a line to General Clay. I think he could give you full information as to how the military agreement was arrived at. I do not think the State Department had anything to do with that, but it was one of those things that happened right at the end of the war. I recall that he testified in the House before the committee to the effect that he was in a certain sense responsible for it, and that he regretted he had made the agreement which sort of bottled up in Berlin, putting us in effect at the mercy of the Russians and getting in and out. I don't know about Vienna. The chairman, is there anything further, Mr. Secretary, you wish to tell us? Mr. Allen, well, most of the remaining things, one way or another, have been covered in my prepared statement, which is 4 more pages. I could read it perhaps rather hurriedly. I might bring up thoughts to the minds of people here, unless you think you have exhausted the subject. Senator Smith, go ahead. The chairman, I think we might put it into the record. We want to know about this matter. Mr. Allen, the purpose of the joint resolution before you, I believe that has been printed. Senator Nolan, yes, we have copies of it. Mr. Allen, is to place the United States in a position to carry out the policy expressed in the letter that I have just read.
All right, so what we'll do is read this next section and let that be the final section for this evening. And we'll open answer after discussing this section. So I'll put myself on mute and we'll just read this last section.
Types of jurisdiction to be relinquished. I shall go into the reasons for the policy in a moment. But before doing it, I should like to describe this jurisdiction we are talking about. What is it and what does it consist of? Let us assume that an American is in Casablanca in the French zone of Morocco and commits a crime. If the victim is a Moroccan or a Frenchman or an Englishman or anyone other than another American, the Moroccan state prosecutes this American in the local courts today. But if the victim is another American, then a member of our consulate prosecutes that American criminal before our council sitting as a judge. In a civil case, it is the same thing. So long as both parties are American, our council decides the case. Such is the jurisdiction given to us in our bilateral treaty with Morocco in 1836. I should add, go ahead.
We see that, and this is specifically for the people watching, to say Moroccan states aren't needed. But we're seeing here that the U.S. representatives themselves are saying who prosecutes Americans in the local courts in that day, the Moroccan state, just as it does today. So I wanted to call that out because that's specific language saying that a Moroccan state, not an American state, not a Moorish American state, not anything else. But we got these specific letters, Moroccan, being used, nothing other than that. So I did want to just call that out, and I yield with that.
I should add, to be accurate, that the treaty also permits our consuls to probate the wills of Americans who die in Morocco. At one time, we exercised a much broader jurisdiction. We had jurisdiction over an American criminal, even when the victim was another nationality, as when an American attacked a Britisher or Frenchman or a Moroccan. The same rule applied in civil cases. If somebody wanted to sue an American, he had to seek out American in the American court, no matter what the nationality of the other person was. In short, we had jurisdiction in any suit where an American was a defendant, regardless of the plaintiff's nationality. That was up until a few years ago. But we did not have the particular jurisdiction in mixed cases by express treaty rights. The treaty gives us jurisdiction over a case involving two Americans, but in mixed cases where the American is defendant and the other party not American, we exercise this right because we were entitled to most favored nation treatment under our treaty of 1836. And so we could exercise it only so long as some other power had a right in mixed cases.
So,
okay, the International Court of Justice.
real quick point of interest.
Okay.
So again, we just have some basic points being mentioned about America having jurisdiction by treaty, right? So our Moroccan treaty, the rights to have jurisdiction, being the most favored nation, right? To exercise their jurisdiction over America and Americans. Why? Because where's the Moroccan government? Remember, there's no Moroccan government at the time. It's a treaty between Morocco and America. Okay, we got one person not there. Who you gonna shake hands with? Right? I just hope you pick up the paper and hand it back to me and we can continue where we left off. So, this is, again, the United States on the record saying that who they have treaty rights over, but they're not mentioning the more subjects. You just, pay attention to that. But we can continue.
Let me see, what was I? Let's see, where did I leave? I kept exercising.
The International Court of Justice. Right here.
Okay, thank you. The International Court of Justice so ruled in 1952 when we kept exercising this jurisdiction in the French zone of Morocco after all other countries had given it up. And that meant they should have given it up too, because they weren't really supposed to have it in and of themselves, right?
Yeah.
After everybody else gave it up.
Yeah. And even furthermore, we were supposed to be in our seats ready to accept that, them giving it up, which is half the reason why I yield with that.
Okay, we lost you for a while. It was silence for a while.
Yeah, I was trying to keep my daughter off the mic.
Okay, we didn't hear anything you said about they had to give it up. Yeah. Okay, we went to the International Court. The French took us to the International Court, and we had to give up these mixed cases in 1952 because we had that only by a most favored nation right, and all the other countries had given it up, so we did not have it anymore. Our consular court in the French zone has ceased, consequently, to exercise jurisdiction in this extended form, and now it hears only cases between two Americans. Our consular court in the international zone of Tangier is expected to do the same, to give up the mixed cases. Since there are two, all other powers have given up this jurisdiction. If we do not have it in the French zone, it is clear we do not have it in Tangier. In the Spanish zone, the problem does not arise since we have had no consular courts in that zone. Any offense committed by Americans in the Spanish zone would come before the consular court in Tangier. Quite apart from the jurisdiction we once had under the most favored nation clause, our consular courts are permitted by Act of Algeciras of 1906 to exercise jurisdiction when certain actions are concerning, for example, customs fraud and contraband of arms are brought against them by Moroccan officials. In practice, however, no such actions have ever been brought in our consular courts. I mentioned Algeciras just to make the record full and complete because we have never had any actions under it. Thus, Mr. Chairman, I think it is fair to say that, as a practical matter, what we have to relinquish is the only other jurisdiction over cases arising between Americans as provided in the Treaty of 1836. I must add here that we have extended our jurisdiction under the Treaty of 1836 to certain Moroccans. This is rather strange. Who are our proteges? This was done without treaty basis as a matter of custom and usage. For instance, if a prominent Moroccan merchant became the distributor of General Motors in the old days, you could say that man is a protege of the United States. The British and the French did that sort of thing, so we had certain parts of our own, certain pets of our own. The Convention of Madrid in 1880 limits the number we can designate as proteges. They are certainly Moroccans employed by our legation, by our consulates, and by American wholesale commercial establishments. Only the United States still has proteges in Morocco. It is another queer situation in which the United States is holding on to these vestiges of imperial days.
All right. So before we conclude this read, let's just talk about what's just read. Um, as stated in the last few paragraphs, they only wanted to focus on the Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1836 for practical reasons. Also noting that they haven't exercised anything under the Act of Algeciras. Why? Or in the name of the Act of Algeciras, let's say why? Because that's what establishes independence in Morocco. Has there been independence for anybody to establish anything or kicked off? Nobody has kicked off this this act, this treaty, until independence starts, right? So they were bringing it up to talk about it in a holistic sense, the complete view. But for practical reasons, since nobody at the time started to exercise what that treaty was all about, they weren't really concerned about it. Okay, and then it goes to say the Convention of Madrid in 1880 limits the number we or the United States can designate as proteges. Okay, how does this limit it? Well, it has certain instructions. It says this person does this, well, you can't consider this person under your jurisdiction. If this person does this, they can be under your jurisdiction, etc. So it limits based off of the simple instructions that it gives, right? Submitting a list of protected persons protected by that state, that has to happen. That limits who is and who is not, right there. Um, um, and then they're going to say, it is another queer situation in which the United States is holding on to the vestige of imperial days. So remember how they were talking about bringing the vestiges of colonialism into the new Morocco, in which they still are saying here that it's another situation of them bringing the vestiges of colonialism of imperial days into this new Morocco, having jurisdiction over the proteges, right? So I said that to bring everything that we just read in full circle, okay? Because it called out the Act of Algeciras and what it does, right? You see that nobody was dancing in that reality at this time. Then you see the Treaty of Madrid and the power, how it separated the world up until this point, right? You got half people protected over according to this, half people is not protected according to this, right? So we see the buildup. This Treaty of Madrid was being exercised in 1880, but not so much this Act of Algeciras. We see the buildup, right? So with that, I'll yield the floor to anybody who has any questions or comments as it relates to this document or Moroccan history and international law in general, for that matter. So if anybody has anything, feel free to bring it to the table, and I'll yield with that. No questions, no comments. Y'all must be ready to party tonight. Okay.
I
Yeah.
just want to say this, all of this reading is expanding, putting the puzzle pieces so that we can see what really was going on. But there's something I had sent to Abdul, and it was regarding the Kingdom of Morocco. And they kept saying the Kingdom of Morocco, but they were still talking between United States, and they're talking about taxes, and they're still acting like the Kingdom of Morocco is the empire.
Yeah, yeah. And with these, that's why I'm personally so onto sticking with the basics of how you can differentiate the two. You know, because that you don't have to know too much of law to use common sense in those areas. You to start off.
My name is Michael Laws Bay, and I just wanted to say I was in the Andalus, Florida territory area. If there was anybody out here wanted to connect, definitely do that.
We can't hear you. Sound like you going out real bad.
I'm in the Florida territory. I'm in the car right now, so it may be cutting out pretty bad. But if anybody wants to connect down here, I'm in Florida territory.
there's a at this moment there's a Moroccan state being established there. So if you wish to assist that Moroccan state, just send an email to trusteeship.council.wrc@gmail.com. I'll say it again. That's trusteeship.council.wrc@gmail.com. Just send an email with your name, your phone number, and the territory you reside in, obviously Florida, but just for the record,
Now,
put
is
that in
that,
the email.
not to interrupt, but trusteeship uh dot council or consul?
Council, COUNCIL.
Okay. WRC@gmail.com.
Right.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in doing all of those things. Okay, I have that email. I'll send over all my information. And that again, that's trusteeship dot council WRC@gmail.com.
Correct.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Problem more. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments?
It's the same, gentlemen. Earlier they were talking about religion, and I feel like religion's it's a political mechanism to basically put you under a status. How they're using it now. It's more of a political status now, and they was talking about the Christian black codes and Una Sanctum, and you said that that you got the trust email, and it's the world's biggest trust, right? That's what Una Sanctum is, and the Christian black codes is what we're underneath. But what you guys are instituting is a Moorish state that we can all be a part of, and that's the jurisdiction. Is that how we're moving? Is that in a? I guess that's a question.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Just as you see the United States having several independent states, and they come together and form one state called the United States of America, and that's who governs the land mass, being one state with several individual states. We pretty much doing the exact same thing.
Okay. I concur. I'm on board.
All right. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Oh, hello, this is Devontae Bay. I would just like to say, if anybody in North Carolina would like to continue with the state government and reclaiming the territory, they can reach out to me or Akil Bay, and he'll reach out to me as well.
Glad you said something, because there is a group of Moors, a newer group of Moors in that territory that's formulating a state now. So I'll text you after this meeting is over.
Yeah, because I'm already already reached out to Star Kelly and
Okay.
and one other noble as well. But I was more so talking to, as far as the matriarchs as well. I guess well, yeah, because they play a pivotal role in this. But I was just like, it's like more of a call out before we end it. How did the phone die?
I told you. With that said, also I'll promote New Mecca as well, which is the territory is reclaiming a territory commonly known as Oregon. They're looking for Moors to develop the state. So if you're in that territory and you're interested, feel free to reach out to the trusteeship council email, again at trusteeship.councilwrc@gmail.com. Right. One last call. before we conclude here, does anybody have any questions or comments before we conclude? Right. All right, it was a good meeting. I appreciate you all for coming. Before we end this meeting, Wazir Kenan, I'm not sure if you'd like to say anything. He's probably busy. But again, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate the participation. We'll leave off, or we'll start off next time at this same area, page 14. So I look forward to seeing you all again. We'll be posting the open forum whenever the next time we'll have it. So just be on the lookout for that. It'll be the same link. All right. So you don't have to ask for the link next time if you have it now. But again, I thank you all for coming, and hopefully I'll see you all next time. Islam.
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 Islam.